Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News at 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's start talking about WWE. Let's start talking about NXT. And let's start talking about Mandy Rose, because Monday Night Raw superstar Mandy Rose made a surprising return to the Black and Gold brand last night on Tuesday night's edition of NXT on the USA Network. Now, Raw superstar Mandy Rose has made a return to NXT. Last night saw Rose come to the stage during a singles match between Saray and Gigi Dolan. Now, both competitors stopped and stared at Rose before continuing the match, which Saray won. But after the bow, an impressed Rose immediately turned and left to the backstage area. Now, she did later appear in a brief backstage segment with the Robert Stone brand. Now, regarding the Robert Stone brand, we do have an update on that as well, because last night on NXT, saw Aaliyah and Jessie Carmia lose to Kaden Carter and Casey Catanzaro. After the match, Aaliyah snapped and blamed their troubles on Robert Stone. She attacked him and left him laying, then marched out past a shocked Carmia. Frankie Monet, who has had a few cryptic backstage segments with the Robert Stone brand in recent weeks, came walking out and got Carmia to leave with her as well. Now, Monet, Carmia and Stone were later spotted together backstage and were asked if we were seeing Aaliyah with the group moving forward. Monet responded and said the Robert Stone brand will no longer have to worry about Aaliyah. That's when Rose appeared again. She walked up and said, "It looks like the Robert Stone brand is now under new management." Monet laughed and smiled at her, while Stone looked on disappointed. Rose walked away to end the segment. Now, there's no word yet, it must be stated, because that's a lot of moving parts there. That just feels what NXT's like at the moment. There's so much, and WWE for that matter, with the return to the road. There's so many moving parts. There's so many things that are being planned and then being moved around, whether it's the draft, whether it's returns to NXT, whether it's being called up to the main roster in the case of Tegan Nox, Shotzi Blackheart, or just Shotzi now because she's lost her last name, and Toni Storm. There's so much going on at the moment. It's very difficult to pin it all down and try and figure out what's going on. So as of right now, there's no word yet on why Mandy Rose realistically was back on NXT last night. We don't know the backstage reason why she was back. If this is a permanent thing, if this is a bit of, prior to the pandemic, there was this feeling that the lines or the borders between NXT and Raw and SmackDown weren't as thick as they used to be. There was a bit of crossover, especially with NXT going on the USA Network. We don't know if this is that going back to it, where we're going to see some main roster stars crossover and then stay on Monday Night Raw. We don't know if Mandy Rose has moved back to NXT in the same way that, Samoa Joe was released, but now he's back with NXT, or we've seen people come back in the past, whether it was Ember Moon or whether it was, Breezango. They're no longer with the company, but other people that have moved back to the Black and Gold brand, Finn Balor, etc. We don't know. It's very interesting, and we don't know if the two segments will be related moving forward in terms of the storyline. We don't know if the Robert Stone brand and Frankie Monet is going to be related to Mandy Rose. We don't know what's going on. It hasn't been confirmed. It does look like, though, that Mandy Rose will be back for another run with the brand, as announcer Vic Joseph noted in a post-show tweet that she is back in NXT. WWE also posted a clip to Instagram where Mandy Rose says, "I'm back." Furthermore, Mandy Rose has also retweeted a photo from her appearance and added one of those quote tweets saying, "I'm back." Now, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting, and I think it caught a lot of people off guard. There were, as far as I'm aware, there were no talks of, Mandy Rose is going to be coming back, Mandy Rose is going to be going back to NXT. There are plenty of stars over the years, and especially since NXT's moved to the USA Network, that at some point or other, when they're not really have been doing that much on Raw, SmackDown, they've asked, can I go back to NXT? Because at least I'll be doing something there worthwhile. At least I won't be just spinning my wheels, going out and having pointless matches with no story behind them. My character's just getting stale and it's not evolving. There have been plenty of stories of this, whether it's Aleister Black, Malachi Black, whether it's Kevin Owens, whether it is someone like Finn Balor who was able to come back, whether it was Andrade who was offered to go back. There are so many names that eventually they leave WWE or they're still with WWE, and stories come out about them wanting to go back. And most of the time, 90% of the time, they're told no. The reason they're told no is a very wish-washy answer. Most of the time it's, we need you on Raw and SmackDown. Who's going to replace you? And they're kind of like, well, nobody, because I'm not being used right now. The Mandy Rose one is interesting because I mean, it's not a case of she was heavily featured in on Monday Night Raw, but she was engaging in a feud for the Women's Tag Team Championship. She was in a tag team with Dana Brooke, and if she's gone back now to NXT, it would appear that she's just gone back to NXT, and it's sort of like, okay. And I recall when NXT moved to the USA Network, and Triple H was asked about this before, when it came to talents being called up or called down, however you want to look at it, to the main roster, to Raw, SmackDown. He said to the press, to journalists, to websites, etc., several times that previously when they were on the WWE Network, it could be as quick as they could get a call on like a Wednesday or whatever and say, look, we need them for Raw or on a Monday, or we need them for SmackDown on a Tuesday. It was that quick. And they had to do it because they didn't have all of these commitments that they have now. It was just on the network. It was a WWE-owned property, and it was on the network, and they had plenty of names at the Performance Center. That's what they would do. With them moving to the USA Network, they don't want to actively make the NXT brand weaker by calling up stars and then leaving this huge void there on the black and gold brand. So he said, now there has to be a bit of a courtesy call of, look, I want to have Karrion Kross, and I want to have him soon. And he goes, right, okay, give me 30 days, give me 60 days. We need to plan this in. We need to get the belt off him. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to write him off television. We need to put someone else over on the way out. We need to do all of these things. And it feels like, doesn't it, with the Bayley injury, that things have just changed. Things have just dramatically changed over the course of the last few days or so. Now, yes, we had names involved in dark matches before Raws and SmackDowns recently, whether it is Shotzi Blackheart, whether it is, Tegan Nox was involved in one, she's just come back from injury, but whether it was Toni Storm as well, Karrion Kross, Bronson Reed, all of those names have had tryouts, if you will, for the officials on the main roster. But because of the Bayley injury, and then suddenly last week on SmackDown, we've got Tegan Nox, we've got Shotzi Blackheart on that show, we've got Toni Storm coming. I can imagine, and I don't know if this is the case, but I can imagine Triple H and those within NXT going, whoa. You've just taken 3 female talents. Yes, I know we've got all of these talents at the Performance Center, but this isn't the NXT that was on the WWE Network. We need a name on this show. We need a couple of names on this show because we're still indebted to the USA Network. They don't want to see all the stars disappear and the ratings get even worse than they've already been at this point. Come on, give us something here. And maybe that's the case. It's funny that we're doing all of this, and the draft supposedly was going to be coming up in August, September. Now it's been pushed back to October, reportedly. Maybe they've decided, look, the changes we were going to make during the draft, because that's pushed back, we need names to replace the names that are leaving. And Mandy Rose is coming back to NXT. It's just, it's a surprising one. It's surprising. And again, to be honest, I like it. I like it. If I'm going to give you my opinion on it, I like it. Mandy Rose, since she moved to Monday Night Raw after she had the Sonya Deville feud last year, frankly has done nothing. I mean nothing of purpose or nothing of any real relevancy. I mean, it's been boring, frankly. It's just been rubbish. Coming off of that feud with Sonya Deville last year, coming out of, obviously we just saw you can trace it back to the Hacker storyline. How crazy is it when you think back to that? But that was the Mandy Rose and Otis storyline, and then the Hacker reveals that Sonya Deville conspired with Dolph Ziggler to set all that up, and Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville are feuding together, and it was going to be a loser gets their head shaved bald, or a hair versus hair match at SummerSlam last year. And then they had the Stalker incident, so Sonya Deville had to step away from WWE, became a loser, leaves WWE. But irrespective of that, the feud was hot. There was great promos, specifically from Sonya Deville. I think she really shone and stood out during that time period. But Mandy Rose was the babyface in that, and she won the match at SummerSlam. She had all of this momentum, and you thought, right, well, if Sonya Deville's not going to be on television, Mandy Rose has all of this momentum behind her. She was just in a money female feud on that roster, and of course Vince McMahon would be head over heels in love of her. Surely now is the time where she really transcends up the card and goes into something substantial and worthwhile. And what do? After just breaking up with a tag team partner who, real life, they were best friends. That's why the tag team worked. That's why the storyline worked. What do they do? They move her to Raw, and you think, okay, they've moved her to Raw because then she can be involved with the Raw Women's Championship. That makes sense. No, they move her to Raw to put her in an even worse tag team with Dana Brooke. And no disrespect to Dana Brooke, but she's been around for a while, and how many different partners has she had? Whether it's Charlotte Flair, whether it's whoever. She's been the henchman for a million different people. And it was a bit like, oh, great. And what do? They come out and they do their weird pose. They do that. And the best thing that Mandy Rose did since moving to Raw last year after that Sonya Deville split was that she fell over at WrestleMania. That's it. That's it. So moving to NXT, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. I'm interested to see what happens going forward. But everything is just in such a state of flux right now for WWE. So it's very interesting to see where this is going forward. Now, last night on NXT wasn't just newsworthy for Mandy Rose returning to the black and gold brand, but we saw Karrion Kross choke out NXT enforcer Samoa Joe. Now, NXT champion Karrion Kross has attacked Samoa Joe, the special enforcer to NXT general manager William Regal. Last night on NXT, the show was headlined by Kross retaining his NXT championship over Johnny Gargano with special referee Samoa Joe. Now, there's been tension between Kross and Joe for a long time now, ever since Joe returned to the black and gold brands, but the tension continued during the match and afterwards last night. After the match, Joe raised Kross's hand with the NXT championship. They had words. Scarlett got in between the two heavyweights as Joe looked like he was ready to fight. Of course, he can't though, because he has to be physically provoked, like Steve Austin in 2003. Joe turned and walked out of the ring, but Kross attacked him from behind. Kross then applied his cross jacket submission on Joe, yelling at him and blaming him. Joe started to fade in the submission, then Kross let go as Joe fell flat on his back. Kross and Scarlett stood tall over Joe with the NXT Championship bouts in the air as NXT went off the air. Now, a lot of people have said, right, this sets up Kross versus Joe, and it does. It does. It remains to be seen, of course, if WWE does have plans for a Karrion Kross versus Samoa Joe match. When Regal brought Joe back several weeks ago on June 15, the storyline conditions were that Joe wasn't an in-ring competitor. He could only get physical if he was provoked first by an NXT superstar, etc. Now, obviously, clearly, Karrion Kross provoked Samoa Joe last night. Now, when Joe returned to the WWE back in June, it was confirmed that Joe is still not medically cleared to compete due to the several concussions that he sustained in early 2020, which is why he was a commentator, then he was eventually released, he subsequently come back. So it's still been reported that Joe isn't cleared to compete, at least as of late June. Joe has vehemently suggested that he's not retiring, he's not finished yet, he's going to wrestle once again in the future. It's just a case of getting cleared and it's a case of going through that process. Now, people will say, well, if he's not cleared to compete, why does Karrion Kross have him in a cross jacket last night? I look at it as there's several ways to look at it. One, of course, it sets up Kross versus Joe, and I think this is WWE NXT angling for that. They're planting the seeds for that. I mean, it's a very obvious seed they're planting, but they want to do Kross versus Joe. I think there's no doubt about that. When it comes to does this must mean that Samoa Joe is cleared, ish. I would say ish. The only thing I would say about it is that Stone Cold Steve Austin, wasn't medically cleared to compete ever. After he retired after WrestleMania 19, he still took his fair share of bumps. Now, that was a different time. The medical standard of being clear, the bar was pretty low at that period of time, and I think if Austin at any point during his career, whether he was medically cleared or not, I said, I want to do another match, they would have done it. And so I think that's worth saying. But there have been several occasions with stuff like that where you're not medically cleared to compete, but they still kind of get physical anyway. This wasn't him taking big bumps, you could argue, last night. This was very, like they do, say, for Ric Flair. Ric Flair's a great example of this, right? Ric Flair, he's not medically cleared to compete, but there's still things they can do to get around it, when they put the sleeper hold in, but it's very gentle and they slowly go down. He's hardly taking a flat back bump and hitting his head on the canvas or anything like that. There's ways around it, but I agree with what people are saying. I agree with what people are speculating when they say, well, first of all, you're saying, well, he can't get physical unless he's physically provoked. He was physically provoked at the end of NXT. That's an angle to set up a match. That's an obvious angle to set up a match. They have to be angling for something. The next TakeOver is the day after SummerSlam. Karrion Kross versus Samoa Joe is a massive main event for that. Samoa Joe wins. He wins the NXT Championship. Karrion Kross goes to the main roster, which he's bound to be going. He's done the dark matches, he's done everything. So I do think we're getting Kross versus Joe at this point. I do think this kind of confirms it, but I don't know if it's massively... he's definitely medically cleared because he had the cross jacket submission locked in last night. I don't know if I necessarily truly buy into that one yet, but I do think this is WWE saying that's the match we want to do. So I think that's the plan right now, but we don't know anything official. Now, this is an interesting story because there's been a lawsuit, if you're not familiar, there's been a lawsuit hanging over Matt Riddle for the last year or so, coming out of the Speaking Out movement. But it looks to be dismissed because Candy Cartwright, Samantha Tavel, has reportedly dismissed her multi-million-dollar lawsuit against WWE star Matt Riddle. Now, court documents show that Cartwright filed to dismiss the lawsuit on Monday. This is according to a report by TMZ Sports. There's no word yet on if the two sides reached a monetary settlement as to the reason why the lawsuit has been dismissed. We don't know. This is what Cartwright's attorney said in the statement, quote, "The parties have put this in their past and are focused on the future." Now, it was noted back in October that Riddle's Speaking Out accuser Cartwright filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Riddle, WWE, Evolve, and Gabe Sapolsky. Now, this lawsuit came after Riddle filed a lawsuit against Cartwright back in September. Cartwright filed to sue each party for $10 million for various damages, emotional distress, attorney's fees, and court costs. WWE and Sapolsky were dismissed from the lawsuit back in late March. United States District Court, Northern District Judge of Illinois, Judge Manish Shah, dismissed WWE and Sapolsky without prejudice and lack of personal jurisdiction, while Riddle's motion to dismiss was denied at the time. Judge Shah ruled that Tavel failed to demonstrate specific personal jurisdiction lies over WWE. In a sworn affidavit, WWE stated they had no involvement in May 2018 wrestling event and didn't even employ Riddle at that period of time. Now, Riddle had previously filed to dismiss the lawsuit on December 3rd of last year. At the time, the court said he went into detail as to why it should be dismissed, but of course it wasn't. Now, whilst this lawsuit has been going on, of course, Riddle's been very active on the main roster. He's been very active on Monday Night Raw. In fact, he's become one of the most, I won't say popular, but certainly one of the most featured superstars on Monday Night Raw. But it looks like the lawsuit has been dismissed. Now, again, we don't know the details of this, so there's several different ways you can look at it. You can say, oh, they're looking at it because there was nothing there, so they filed to, she realized this and it cost too much, so she filed to dismiss. Could be a case of she ran out of money. She might have ran out of money when I can't afford, because again, it's with these lawsuits, you have to pay a lot of people, lawyers, court fees, etc. It's expensive. Maybe she realized I ran out of money. That's what WWE likes to do with lawsuits anyway. Not that WWE are involved in this one anymore. Sometimes, if you can just hold it out long enough, people run out of money. Maybe it's a case of Riddle, WWE, and Candy Cartwright came up to a situation where they mediated and decided that they've come to a settlement. We don't know, but the lawsuit is officially, well, not officially over, but she has filed to dismiss the lawsuit. So it looks like it's going to be over very soon. Now, John Cena, there's been lots of discussion about John Cena, when he will be returning to WWE television. He is reportedly a lock for SummerSlam. There was some concern that due to Cena's movie schedule, maybe the SummerSlam plans for him to be facing Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship in the main event of the biggest event in the summer would be up in the air. But that isn't going to happen because Cena is reportedly a lock for SummerSlam. And he is reportedly scheduled to return to WWE television this month in July following, not before, following the Money in the Bank pay-per-view on Sunday night. Now, Cena is expected to wrestle at SummerSlam on Saturday, August 21st in Las Vegas, challenging Universal Champion Roman Reigns in the main event of the show. Now, it's been reported by multiple sources that Cena is still a go for SummerSlam, but there's been no word yet or previously as to when he will actually return to WWE television to set up the match against the Tribal Chief. But in an update, Fightful Select, which of course is their Patreon service, be sure to check that out, they are reporting that the working plan as of right now is for Cena to return on the July 23rd episode of Friday Night SmackDown. That's the SmackDown after Money in the Bank on Sunday. The July 23rd SmackDown is scheduled to take place at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the post-Money in the Bank episode of the Blue brand on Fox. It was noted that Cena could return, of course, sooner than that, but as of yesterday, the plan is for Cena to make his long-anticipated return to WWE on the July 23rd episode of SmackDown on Fox. Now, Sunday, of course, is the Money in the Bank pay-per-view that will feature Reigns defending against Edge. It's very likely Reigns is going to retain. There's no word yet on how they're planning to get to Cena versus Reigns for SummerSlam, but they are going to get there eventually. It has also been reported that Edge is scheduled to face Seth Rollins at SummerSlam. So those four names, I think Rollins is going to be involved, so Edge doesn't win. They spin off to go to Edge Rollins. Cena versus Reigns is left. That's the plan. That's the plan. Of course, Cena hasn't been seen on WWE television since 2020 at WrestleMania 36, where he lost to The Fiend Bray Wyatt in that Firefly Funhouse cinematic match. So it's great to see Cena on his way back, and he is scheduled to be back not this Friday, but the Friday after on SmackDown on Fox. Now, speaking of WWE television, let's talk about Monday Night Raw, because the ratings for Raw are in this week, and they are up. They had to be up this week, because last week, of course, was the new record low for Monday Night Raw, as I mentioned last year. And as long as I've been doing this channel, every time there is a record low, there will be another one, because there always is, because Raw is on the downward slope. It's been like that for years at this point, so that's no surprise. But this week's Monday Night Raw, the ratings were higher, as they should be after a holiday week. Monday's live, well, not live, it was taped actually, Money in the Bank Go Home edition of Raw, the final show in the WWE Thunderdome era, with the final build for Sunday's Money in the Bank pay-per-view, drew an average of 1.609 million viewers on the USA Network. This is according to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. Now, this is up 9.31% from last week's 1.472 million viewers. Last week's show drew the lowest Raw viewership in the history of the Red brand. Now, Raw drew a 0.43 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. This is up 4.88% from the last week's 0.41 key demo rating. That 0.43 key demo rating represents 560,000 viewers in the 18 to 49 range, which is up 4.48% from the 536,000 18 to 49 viewers on last week's show in that 0.41 key demo rating of last week. Last week's Raw was tied with two other shows for the lowest key demo rating in the show's history. Monday's Go Home Raw drew the best viewership since June 21, but is still ranked as the 5th lowest viewership of all time. So whilst we can celebrate this, it's still very, very low. And that's my point with all of this. The key demo rating was the 3rd lowest of the year, the 2nd lowest in history. Viewership was up 9.31% from the previous week, while the key demo was up 4.88% from the last week as well. So look, people can say, oh, well, it improved. But let's be honest. If you're WWE and if you're celebrating Monday Night Raw, your flagship show, it's not their A show anymore because that's SmackDown, because they get more viewers. They're on network television. They get more money for it. Nevertheless, if WWE is celebrating, see, I told you the ratings would go back up this week. What are we worrying about? What are we worrying about? It's 1.6 million views for Raw. For Raw, I remember, again, and it goes back to that clip of Triple H in 2014 when he comes out and talks about his friend Mark, right? His friend Mark, I'm so angry, I'm going to tweet and I'm going to watch the show next week. They ain't watching anymore, Paul. They're not. They're not watching anymore. That show was viewed by something like 4 or 5 million viewers. 1.6. Yes, it was a tape show. Yes, it's the Thunderdome. And yes, people are going to say, well, once we get fans back, once we get fans back, we're going to be going back to Attitude Era numbers, aren't we? No, the show's bad. The show is a bad show. The thing I'm so morbidly curious to see at this point is a live crowd really going to put up with some of the stuff they present on Monday Night Raw at the moment? I don't think they will. If anything, that's why more people will watch, because they'll be like, Surely they won't do this in front of a live audience because they get booed out of the building. Surely, right? I don't know. But the numbers still aren't good for Monday Night Raw. Finally, of course, WWE returns to touring this week, beginning Friday night on SmackDown. And as expected, WWE reportedly does have big things planned for their return to touring this weekend. The Thunderdome era is officially behind us, and WWE is back on the road Friday, beginning with SmackDown in Houston, Texas. The Money in the Bank pay-per-view will be held Sunday in Fort Worth, Texas, and of course, Monday's Raw is going to be taking place in Dallas. Now, in an update, it was reported yesterday by WrestleVotes that WWE has, quote, some cool and exciting things planned for the coming weekend. It was also said that fans can expect a surprise or two to happen, and that makes sense. This is like a new season for WWE. It's a revamp, it's a refresh, whatever phrase you want to use it. So, obviously, names that have been thrown around are Becky Lynch, Brock Lesnar. I don't know if Brock will come back. Cena's going to be coming back the following week. So there are names. Sasha Banks too will be coming back. So those are the surprises I would expect, but maybe some other ones as well. It's interesting that the report also stated that this was, quote, truly a pivotal time in recent WWE history. Now, as I mentioned, there's no word yet on what these plans will entail, but is it pivotal? It's interesting. It's interesting, and I'm very curious to see what happens. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, gut the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.